Your flowers growing, ain't you got no rhymes for me? Do do do, feeling groovy. La la da da, we're feeling groovy. Well, I've got no deeds to do, no promises to keep. I'm dappled and drowsy and ready to sleep. Let the morning time drop all its petals on me. Life, I love you, all is groovy. La da 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 da. I've got no needs to do, no promises to keep. We're dappled and drowsy and ready to sleep. Let the morning time drop all its petals on me. Life, I love you, all is groovy. Yeah. La da 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 da. When I open up my eyes, when I open up my eyes, I get such a surprise, taking in everything I see. From the sunlight on my skin to the skin I'm living in, a phenomenal anomaly. If you think of every atom, every action and reaction that happened or happened to be, from the very first movement in the universe to the time of you and me, sing I'm alive and the world is my stage. You and I, we're living in the golden age. Living in the golden age. Everybody seems to be searching for some meaning, but meaning don't matter to me. Yeah, I realize while the wise advise is simply simplicity. They say this is your life, man, do what you can to find what makes you happy. Yeah, this is my time, I'ma get mine before I fade or fade away. 'Cause I'm alive and the world is my stage. You and I, we're living in the golden age. Living in the golden age. It feels like I'm winning 'cause everything is spinning. Yeah, I'm a revolutionary. 'Cause around comes around, from atomic to galactic, I'm talking universally. So it's good to see you, friend, I'm sure we'll do this again. But for now, until then, won't you bring it in close for a dose of oxytocin, let everything do its thing. 'Cause I'm alive and the world is my stage. You and I, we're living in the golden age. I'm alive and the world is my stage. You and I, we're living in the the golden age. Living in the golden age. Living in the golden age. I've got gratitude for you, and here I send these waves right to your ear. I've got gratitude for you, and here I send these waves right to your ear. I've got gratitude for you, and here I send these waves right to your ear. I've got gratitude for you, and here I send these waves right to you. Happy Sunday, everybody. Welcome to Hilltop.
Morning. Not that I really need it, but good morning. I'm Liz. I'm your practitioner of service, and it's so good to see you. I feel like we're in my living room because we're a small group in this beautiful living room, and I'm glad to see you, and I'm glad that you're here. And I know we're in competition with the Avocado Festival, but for all of you who are watching us, there's a major event going on in town called the Avocado Festival. And since this used to be the avocado capital of the United States, I think that's changing to be more wine because of water. But we're here, and if you're meant to be here, you will be here. And I hope that you will be uplifted by being here and listening to the beautiful music. And we have a guest speaker, Reverend Jim Jones, who is going to talk to us about, and welcome, Jim. And I just welcome all of you, and I'm glad that you're here. So I'd like to open with prayer. And if you choose to close your eyes, just feel grounded in your chair. And know that as we breathe together, let's all take 2 deep breaths together. And when I breathe, I know and I feel so connected with Spirit, so connected with that universal energy that I call God. That beautiful, beautiful feeling of essence of everything that we see, we touch, we feel, we sense in the birds, in the trees, in each blade of grass, each flower. That's God. And God and that same energy is within all of us. And that Spirit is what lights me up, lights all of us up, and gives me a sense of why I'm here. To receive and feel love, to give it in this beautiful flow, in this beautiful energy that I call life. And we come here this Sunday to worship together, to communicate and to share our deep love, our joy, sometimes our pain. And we come here in community to share, to be uplifted, to have tools that will carry us through the week, to know that as we greet each other, that we're seeing God in each person. When we look in their eyes, we see God, because we are all that essence within us. And I'm so blessed to be here and so grateful for all of you that have come outside of the virtual in the world, and anyone that's watching. And we bless you. No matter what your path is or what you're feeling, you are welcome, and you're here for a reason, whether you're tuning in or physically being here. I'm so grateful that we're sharing this moment. I love Hilltop, and I love all of you, and I'm so glad that we're here. I release these words into that infinite, universal mind with deep, deep gratitude. Together we say, and so it is. And so this morning, I have picked a reading from Alan Watts. And it goes like this. You are a function of what the whole universe is doing in the same way that a wave is a function of what the whole ocean is doing. And so it is. So now we're going to take 3 minutes of silent meditation. Go within. And one of the things that, before we do that, I want to talk about the loving kindness meditation, because this is something we've incorporated in our service that I love and I'm practicing at home. And it is something that's been around for a long time, and it's just a consciousness of love and that flow of love that we give out and that we receive. So I would like you to stay in that meditative state and just be centered. And whether you close your eyes or you keep them open, whatever's comfortable. Think of someone that moves you and that you love deeply, whether that's a person or an animal. Just be centered and feel that vibration in your heart. And know that this is a wish that you want for them. And go within and first just say to yourself, may I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. And may I be happy. And now picture that person or that animal that you have this deep love for. And again say to yourself, may they be filled with loving kindness. May they be well. May they be peaceful and at ease. May they be happy. Now let that feeling just flow energetically in the entire sanctuary. And just think of all of us sitting here. And for those at home, and again say to yourself, may they be filled with loving kindness. May they be well. May they be peaceful and at ease. And may they be happy. And so it is. And as we come back, fully present and conscious, we move to our next level. Thank you.
I was trying to think of the most naturalist songs I've written for Jim Jones's talk. And so one night I was thinking about how we're all roaming through space on this rock together, dancing through the stars. So we'll try this one out. Out of nowhere, you were right there, stood right by me. I knew your face. Yeah, you got my back like a jetpack. You boost me up like outer space. And we're dancing to the stars. That's how it came to be. Won't you dance to the stars with me? Hey, we're dancing to the stars. That's all we really do. Wanna dance to the stars with you. We're designed to think to survive. You helped me zoom out when you arrived. We're the same things, all just starlings, my darling earthlings. Don't you feel alive? 'Cause we're dancing to the stars. That's how we came to be. Won't you dance to the stars with me? Yeah, we're dancing to the stars. That's all we really do. Wanna dance to the stars with you. Everywhere we go, we're dancing through the stars. Everyone we know, we're dancing through the stars. Every kiss we steal, everything we feel, we're dancing through the stars. We are. Why am I here? I've got an idea. The music I hear when I'm with you. Let's get working. Pull back that curtain so the people hurting can hear it too. And we're dancing to the stars. That's how we came to be. Won't you dance to the stars with me? Hey, we're dancing to the stars. That's all we really do. Wanna dance to the stars with you. Out of nowhere, you were right there, stood right by me. I knew your face. You're all my heroes, T-0. We're taking off now, back to our place. And we're dancing to the stars. How it came to be. Won't you dance to the stars with me? Hey, we're dancing to the stars. That's all we really do. Wanna dance to the stars with you. Everywhere we go, we're dancing through the stars. Everyone we know, we're dancing through the stars. Every kiss we steal, everything we feel, we're dancing through the stars. We are. Here we are. Yes, we are. Yeah, we are. Please welcome the Reverend Jim Jones.
So, funny thing, I don't know if you have noticed that when Guy introduces me, he talks about the irreverent Jim Jones, and that's because in naturalism there isn't really a title for Reverend. So I appreciate that's the tradition here, but I also have a fun time when Guy calls me irreverent. Yes. So, let me take these off. One of the things I really appreciate about Hilltop community, but the community at Hilltop, is it opens up the door for people from a variety of perspectives. And that is obviously being seen here, allowing somebody like myself to speak today as well as teach classes here, and I really appreciate that opportunity. But I thought I'd like to share a little bit about what a naturalist is, because some of you might not be as familiar with that. So I put together 4 of the main kinds of questions that I get, and if we have some time at the end, I'll open it up to see if there's any other kinds of questions that you might have for me. But let's go ahead and get started with the first one. And Steve, I think it needs to be on the other screen. Oh, there we go. Did I do that or did you do that? Okay, perfect. I do need my glasses for a second, make sure I didn't turn it off. I did. Okay, there we go. So, first question is, what is a naturalist? So the distinction here we need to make at first is that there's a difference between philosophical naturalism and environmental naturalism. They both have the same title, but what's happening with the environmentalist is it's basically somebody who's very concerned about the environment and the ecosystem and how do we understand that and participate in that. And whereas that's completely compatible with where I'm coming from, philosophical naturalism is a little bit different. It has to do with the nature of reality. And so for a naturalist, the claim is that all that exists is the natural world, that there is no supernatural world. And that kind of comes in 2 flavors. Some that would be absolutely dogmatic, that there is no possibility of anything supernatural, and others that would say, I just don't see any evidence for it. And so I'd be more on that second way of looking at it, where I leave it open for the possibilities, but at this point I'm not convinced that that's the case. And so that would be at a core what we're thinking about in terms of a naturalist is it's someone who's claiming that the natural world is the only world that actually exists. So then, and I just talked about the natural versus supernatural, within that we want to understand that there is a pattern to how things function in the universe. Everything happens in a particular order and for a cause. And this is vital, because if this wasn't the case, life just wouldn't be possible. If today I drink my coffee and it's good for me, and tomorrow I drink my coffee and it's poison, that doesn't work so good. If I jump up today and I come back down, but I jump up tomorrow and I fly off to the moon, that's not so good either. It's vital for life that everything happens in a consistent way, that there's these patterns. And so naturalism is really concerned with trying to understand what are these patterns, how does life work, so we can understand it better. A couple of things that happen from that is, especially at our current state of understanding, which I don't want to overstate because there's far more that we don't know than that we do, but from what we do know, there's a lot of things that are either possible or not possible. And so when we think about how things happen on this planet, there's a lot that we understand in that category that would seem to kind of take the magic out of life, because we would have answers for how these things work from a cause and effect purpose. But I would say that that doesn't really take away the fact that life can't be experienced as magical, in the sense that it's amazing, that it's wonderful, that there's beauty that we see in a way that is hard to explain, but yet we're not resorting to something that would be, as Guy likes to say, magical thinking. It's still staying within these patterns in a very logically operating, basically a scientific worldview of how the world functions. So in a nutshell, that's what a naturalist is, somebody who's convinced that the natural world is all that exists and that it operates according to certain patterns, we might call them laws of nature, and that we try to understand that as best we can. So the next question I usually get is, well, does that mean that you're an atheist? Well, you could say that for sure, but I prefer to actually define myself by what I do believe in, not by what I don't believe in. And so by calling myself a naturalist, I'm stating what I believe. And so even though I wouldn't be offended if somebody used that term to describe me, it's not how I define myself or describe myself. However, there is a very interesting aspect of spirituality that happens within a naturalist perspective, which might feel like it's very much at odds with the idea of naturalism. So to kind of explain this, let me just kind of do a little background on what we mean by the word spirit. So in many of the Indo-European languages, which are most of them, the word for spirit comes from the word for breath. And if we think about some words that we use in English, there is inspire, which we think of in terms of creativity and whatnot, but it literally means to breathe in. And there is expire, which we sometimes think, well, something's past its shelf date or somebody has died, but that literally means to breathe out. And so we can see, even with these terms that we still use, this idea of life being this idea of breathing in, this animating force, this thing that gives creativity, is seen as this idea of breath, and then the loss of that breath as the loss of life. So within that, we can think of spiritual aspects as those things that have to do with well-being and how we live. So a concern for spiritual concerns within a naturalist perspective is what makes for life to be experienced as a gift, as a blessing, as something that is shared by others and not just something that a privileged few get to enjoy. Those kinds of questions, those practices that we engage in, many of which we do here at Hilltop, are key for a naturalist perspective as well. There's a whole branch of this, if you'd like to explore it, called spiritual naturalism. And there's even things that are called secular spirituality. And secular is one of those words we think of as not religious, but it really just means of this world. So a secular spirituality would be concerns about what makes for life from a this worldly perspective. So then the question is, why are you interested in church? It's funny because there's a lot of Christians that I know that don't actually go to church, and I am not a believer, and I do go to church, and it's always struck me as kind of odd, and they find it very odd too. They're like, well, why are you doing that? Why do you go if you don't believe in God? Well, again, it's not about the fact that I don't believe in God, but there's a lot that we share in common. And so there's this idea of spiritual community. Now, all communities are kind of the same in that they're all made up of people, and people will be people. And sometimes it's hard when we get together because there's always this challenge between what do I get to share as far as what makes me uniquely me, and what do I need to do in order to be a part of the larger community? So there's this constant trade-off between personal, individual thinking about things, and then collectively what makes us who we are as a group. And with Hilltop, one of the reasons I find this a place that I can gather is that criteria for what draws people together is very broad. Most of the time when we start the services, we talk about how everyone is welcome regardless of their spiritual path or where they are on their journey. And I very much take that to heart because there's many places I would not be able to go, at least in terms of being able to speak or to teach classes. So the fact that Hilltop allows this shows that they are very much engaging in what they believe, that they are practicing what they preach. And this is key too, because what at the core is going on is we're trying to help each other be better people. We're here to support each other. We're here to encourage one another. And it can be really easy to get caught up in the normal kind of nitpicking about things that happen out in our world, or the bickering or the fighting. And we have to work against that if we want to be who we're claiming that we want to be. And that's one of the things that becomes so important in community, is that we can help encourage each other to be that better self. That when we wrestle with the things that we all wrestle with in terms of that clash that happens when people get together, we can rise above who we are as individuals and become more as we are a community. The thing that kind of lost my train of thought here for just a second, but within that community, when we're thinking about how we can collectively spur each other on to better works, there's the other aspect of it, which is need, that we can be there for each other when we are having trouble. None of us get to bury ourselves. Most of us don't pull our own teeth, or many of the other things that we kind of require others for. It's important that we recognize that none of us are an individual in a true sense. We're all very much dependent on each other. And so having a community of people who are concerned about those same issues is vital for a healthy, thriving community, which I believe is what we are building here at Hilltop. Speaking of funerals, this is the last and probably the biggest question I get asked about is, well, what about death? What does that mean? If you don't believe in God, is that the end? If there's only the natural world, is that the end? Well, in a very quick answer, yes, that's what that would mean. But how does that then impact the way that I live my life? Or what does it mean for me if that's the case? Do I just give up and think, what is this all for? And I would say no. And I want to kind of talk about a couple of different aspects of this that I think are important. Whether or not you have a religious belief, these topics I think are important for all of us to deal with. And the first one is that death defines and gives meaning to life. Have you thought about what it might mean if who you are right now never, ever, ever would die? Billions of years. What kind of priority would there be for anything in your life? Don't worry about the dishes. I'll get that next millennium. You know, it's like everything just becomes like, why bother? Because I got all the time in the world, all the time in the universe. It becomes something that actually sucks meaning out of existence if we didn't actually die. In a very odd way, death actually defines or gives meaning and purpose to life because it's ephemeral. It's short. It doesn't last forever. And because of that, it becomes special. It gets meaning by the fact that it's once and it's unique and it's only something that I get to experience as the one that I am. So this is an important aspect that we need to incorporate into our lives as we're thinking about death, because it's not actually the enemy that sometimes we think that it is. In fact, life, as we experience it, requires death. From a naturalist perspective, and I realize from different religious traditions this isn't necessarily true for everyone, but from a naturalist perspective, we understand who we are as a result of evolution. And the way that evolution functions is that there's reproduction that happens, copies are made, but there's the possibility that copies might be made not exactly correctly, and so you end up with variations, and sometimes those variations are beneficial and sometimes they're not. Now, if you only reproduced once and that was it, nothing really special is going to happen. But when that life or that cycle has a defined period of time, then there's the opportunity for amazing change to happen. So we can see something like with trees that reproduce very slowly, that they don't change nearly as much over time. And we can see something like bacteria that change very rapidly, that they're constantly adapting to the different ways that we're trying to treat them. They have very rapid evolution. And we're somewhere kind of in the middle. And that process of the species that we are as human, how we got to be here, how our brain functions, this is, as far as we can tell, the most complex thing in the universe. And the only way it would have been able to get here is through that process of evolution that requires that death happens. And so we can't actually fully embrace life and say that I am fully engaged with it if we don't also at the same time recognize that part of that definition is the fact that we die. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. We can think about another aspect of this, which is the ability to pass on the baton to the next generation, giving everyone, in a sense, kind of a chance. Imagine if Joe Biden and Donald Trump never died, and we were stuck with these as our only two political candidates forever, right? One of the things that we can be thankful for is none of this lasts forever. It constantly changes, and new thoughts and new ideas are allowed to emerge as we pass on the baton. I can think about in my own life with my own kids. When I grew up thinking about the concept of homosexuality, even though I wasn't actually confronted with it very much when I was, let's say, in high school, at least not to the degree that I knew that people were homosexual. If they were, they mostly hid it, I believe. I had probably what you think of as the fairly stereotypical negative views about it. As I got older, I came to see different ways of thinking about it, and I came to embrace those different ways of thinking about it. But there's still something, if I'm honest, that's very difficult at my core when I see two men kissing. I'm okay with it, but I can't deny that there isn't a little twinge of something that's like, that doesn't feel right, because of that whole history of how I grew up. My kids, they don't have any of that. It's completely not an issue for them. So those things, like my being stuck in a different way of thinking, even though I've worked hard to change my way of thinking about it, some of it is very difficult to change because it just kind of gets written into you. Whereas the newer generations, these new ideas, these new ways of thinking are allowed to emerge and flourish and move into those positions of leadership and power that wouldn't be possible if we didn't have this cycle. So I can think about my eventual demise as a way that I'm handing off the torch, if you will, to my kids, that they now are going to have opportunities that they wouldn't have if I didn't die. Which sounds odd, but it's an important aspect that we need to keep in mind. The Stoics, another philosophy that I like to follow, have a phrase called memento mori, which means remember your death. And it's a phrase that they would use to put in front of them at all times to try and remember this is short. We only have so much time. Very interesting time management book that came out not too long ago called 4,000 Weeks. And it's basically saying that if you live to age 80, you have roughly 4,000 weeks for your life. And the question is, what are you going to do with those? What do you do with that time? If we are in denial about the fact of our mortality, then we are going to have a harder time living well now. Being aware and embracing our mortality is what gives us the vitality that we need to really have, again, an importance or a purpose behind how we're acting and why we're acting. Last part here, a little bit of a deviation. Some of you know that I teach a class here on Sunday mornings on Taoism and well-being. And this is a quote from one of the other main writers of the classical Taoist period, Zhuangzi. And he says, "I was born together with heaven and earth, so that 10,000 things and I are one and the same." I'm going to just unpack that for a minute. So within Taoism, there's a basic thought that everything is just one thing. And this might seem a little bit confusing, but we actually say a very similar thing in modern contemporary science. So if we think about who we are in this room, ultimately, we're all just different collections of atoms, including the chairs and the pews and the floor, everything, right? But those atoms are made up of particles, and ultimately those particles most likely are just simply part of this quantum field, which, again, we're saying everything is actually one thing. It's just manifest in different ways. And so what Zhuangzi is getting at in this passage is he's saying what I am made of is the same thing that all the other things are made of, which we can also say very clearly from how we understand our world. I think Guy has said several times, we are stardust, and I don't think he came up with that phrase. It's been around for a while, but that's very true, right? Stars produce those heavier elements besides the hydrogen and helium that are more of the original atoms that came together at the beginning of our universe. And it's through those stars condensing and creating these heavier elements and ultimately dying and exploding and sending these heavier elements off into space that they come together and allow things like planets to form and ultimately give birth to creatures like ourselves. We are indeed stardust. So for the Taoist, we're all part of this same thing. I and the 10,000 things, which is just a colorful way they talk about all the different things that we see in our world, are one and the same. So there's another line of thinking they have to ask the question, not do I die, but was I born? If we could take another metaphor from more of the Buddhist, but also shared by the Taoist, of an ocean with a wave, they would say life is like a wave coming up in the water. And if I'm that wave, it feels like I'm unique and I have definition, I have form, and I exist for a while. But then the wave goes back down. It didn't really change. It's still all the same stuff. It's still the ocean. It's still that water. They would kind of see all of life as like that. Everything is constantly transitioning to and from, as the Taoist would say, this formlessness into this form, and then back again into the formlessness. This doesn't necessarily take away the idea that there isn't actual loss and that we don't experience grief when we're thinking about death, but it changes a little bit of how we understand the nature of it. Is it something that we need to fight against? Is it the ultimate enemy and something that we need to do all we can to stop from happening? Or is it part of the whole process that makes up what life is? We can also kind of get stuck in thinking that, especially if someone dies young, that their life was cut short. But we kind of need to turn that around. And we need to say, why was it that we even had one day? It's not promised to anybody. All of it is an amazing, miraculous gift. And we can say that even as a naturalist, where it would sound like I'm invoking now more supernatural or theological terms, but it can still be something that we experience in that context, even if we understand that it's arising naturally. So this would be the core concepts of how we would understand the concept of death from a naturalist perspective. It's not by far the most detailed because we only have a limited amount of time, but at the end I would like to just also tell you a little bit about the class that I teach in the mornings, Well-Being in the Tao. If you're interested in understanding more about Taoism and how we understand this, and the naturalism comes into that quite a bit because Taoism, as classical philosophy, incorporates a lot of what we think of as naturalism. And that happens here every Sunday from 9 to 10. If you're interested in coming to that, we'd love to have you. We have lots of fun discussions. There's also an online version of this that happens on Friday mornings via Zoom, if that's something that you're interested in. That's another way you can participate, and you can simply register for that at www.kinship.cafe. So Kinship Cafe is the kind of the header through which this happens, and you'll get the email invitations for the Zoom to be able to follow up on that if you'd like. But we do have a few minutes, so I thought I'd open it up to see if there are any other questions this might have brought to mind for you about how naturalists look at things. Yes?
I know at one time you were a Christian scholar as well as a Christian minister, and you evolved to the naturalist. How did that, give us some insight as to how that came about and why?
Sure. So the question was from Mike. He knew that I was previously a Christian pastor, and how did I go from Christian pastor to naturalist? Let me just start by saying, as a naturalist, I do not in any way, shape, or form look down on people who have religious beliefs. I don't see what happened to me as a progression that I outgrew or evolved past religion. That's not how I view it. There's different things for how I came to understand the world that made it harder for me to still stay within the Christian camp in terms of beliefs, but I still am happy to participate in Christian community. So there's no negativity there. I just want to make that really clear. The primary thing for me is my background was also a lot of cultural anthropology and social linguistics, as well as history when it applied to biblical studies. And as I delved into that, I also had more and more questions about well-being, which I would say is what drove me to understand as well as I could what Christianity was in the first place, because ultimately my driving factor is, what do I do with my life? Who should I be? How should I live? What should I do? And that was a question I could never get out of my mind. I started off in a Christian context. That's just what I happened to be born into. And so that seemed to be the natural way to initially address this issue and study. And I took it through my master's, actually, and became a pastor and was teaching for many years. As I continued that path, I became more interested in things like physics and neuroscience. And as I was exploring those, it became more and more complicated to try and mix together the ideas as they were presented in the biblical text. And again, I'm speaking for my own personal experience here. And it was not like a one day, just a snap and it was different. It was much more of a gradual process, but I would say for myself, it was a continuation of that prior goal of understanding, how do I live my life? What is this all about? What should I be doing? So I didn't, as much as it seemed like a radical change and a shift for some people, and especially my wife, it was much more of a continuity for myself in terms of continuing on that journey, just understanding things from a little bit of a different perspective. Yes?
Yeah, how do you, as a naturalist, how do you view the dream state or people that report that they have out-of-body experiences in other realms or dimensions, or let's say somebody who's on the operating table and later they report, they can report exact conversations of the doctors, the attendants, and their, to themselves, they're clearly in a different dimension, out of the body, but still having life and reporting on reality.
Yeah. So the question here, and I could spend a whole couple hours talking about just this one thing, so this will unfortunately have to be kind of a brief answer. The question was, what about people who have reports of out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences where they're able to experience things that happen apparently from a context that they wouldn't normally be able to have access to, either because they're under sedation or they were not showing signs of life or whatever it may be. And you also talk about dream states, but I'm going to leave that off for right now just for time's sake. So the naturalist answer to that is not meant to say anybody should not have a different perspective on it. Okay, so the question was, how do naturalists view it? I'm presenting that not as saying that this is what you should believe, but just, how do we deal with it or approach it? So the first thing is, there are a lot of different states of perception that the human mind has. I had a situation a while back where I had kind of a weird reaction at a doctor's office because of them shining lights into my eyes that actually caused my heart basically to shut down. It was some type of vagal nerve reaction that basically shut everything down. But as it was shutting down, I had enough about myself to mention to the doctor something's wrong. And then evidently some other doctors came into the room and were trying to figure out what was going on. But to my perception, I was suddenly in this dark room that had 3 different television sets. And they were kind of like these old television sets that you had to kind of tune in with the antenna. And so it was a little bit hazy and it wasn't quite there. And I was just struggling to get these TVs to tune in so I could understand what they were trying to say. And this was a weird way that my mind came up with to try and make sense out of its diminished capacity in terms of what it was receiving as far as information. Our brains are incredible pattern-seeking systems that are also trying to make sense out of whatever kind of input they get. There's a fantastic book that you might want to check out at some point called The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. Has anybody read this book or heard of it? It is fantastic. And he gives this account of this gentleman that comes in because he's having odd behavior and people can't quite put their finger on what it is that's going on, but they think that he needs to get checked out by this neurologist. So the guy has him sit up on the table and he's starting with the neurological test of, the reflexes and that kind of thing. And he asked him to take off his shoe so he can test one of his shoe reflexes, or foot reflexes. And he turns to make some notes on the table and asks the man to put his shoe back on. He turns back around, and the man's sitting there, and his shoe is still on the floor. And the doctor says, "I thought I asked you to put your shoe back on." And he's like, "I did." And so the doctor points at the shoe and says, "Well, what's that?" He says, "That's my foot." What had happened was he had this disconnect that was happening in his brain that was not able to understand the distinction between these different things, but it still had to make sense out of it. And the way he made sense out of it was that his shoe was actually on his foot the way it was supposed to be, but his foot was over there for some reason, and it didn't seem to cause him any trouble. Like, it wasn't a problem that was the case. And we do this all the time, where we have different states of consciousness where we fill in the gaps as best we can to make sense out of what's going on. So my best guess about something like a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience would be kind of a combination of several things. One, there is definitely chemical releases that happen in the brain, which is a chemical system when we undergo things like oxygen deprivation or whatnot. But there's also ways that we try to recreate and understand what we're experiencing, even in this diminished state where we might not fully be able to operate or interact the way we would normally. Now, I can't necessarily prove that, and I'm not trying to convince anybody that they shouldn't believe that somebody actually did have an out-of-body experience, but I would ask a couple of different things. One, how we see requires eyeballs. How does one see without eyes? And keep in mind, what we see is not reality. We already know there's lots more wavelengths out there of light than what the human eye can perceive. There's more smells than the human nose can smell, more tastes than we can taste, right? We only see a small percentage of those things. And in fact, what we know is that color doesn't exist except for in our brain. And it's not in the thing itself, it's in what those things reflect as far as the protons that ultimately make it to, the iris of our eyes that then translates that digital, in a sense, signal into something in our head. Our brain does not have direct access to the outside world. It only receives essentially digital signals that it has to reconstruct into an image of the world inside our head. We're living in a hallucination. So if we had an out-of-body experience that was not dependent on our physical eyes seeing the limited view of reality that we see with our eyes, what would we see? How would we see, and what would we see? It would be incomprehensible if for some reason we could see without the limitations of our physical eyes outside of our physical body. It would be something we had never experienced before. How would we possibly know what it was? It would be like a blind person that suddenly saw for the first time. It would also be very interesting to see if somebody who had one of these out-of-body experiences who wasn't limited by a physical eyeball, if they were colorblind, would they now be able to see color? Or if they were blind, would they now be able to see? If what we are reporting is the same thing that we see with our physical eyes, my suspicion is that that's because we are having some kind of memory or, way that we're perceiving the world from that physical perspective that's getting reinterpreted from this diminished consciousness state into a memory that feels like we were outside of our body. There's other experiments they've done too with destabilizing parts of the brain that identify boundaries of the body. This is one of the things that tends to get triggered when you take psychedelics. It makes that boundary question a little bit more complicated, and people have very similar experiences as well of being outside of their body, even though they're not, in a near-death experience, they're just simply taking hallucinogens. So I think there's a lot of ways that it could be answered. Again, not trying to say this is how you should look at it, but why naturalists look at it the way that they do. Lee.
Kind of talking about what you just spoke about, but is there a clear definition between, you say a naturalist doesn't believe in the supernatural? Is there a clear definition between supernatural and the scientifically unknown?
So the question was, is there a way to distinguish between supernatural and scientifically unknown? The definition of supernatural would be something that is outside of natural phenomenon. So let's say, that there's gravity as a natural phenomenon, and supernatural might be something that's violating the law of gravity for some reason. So if we are going to say that we see something that we don't understand, from the naturalist perspective, they wouldn't necessarily default to saying, oh, well, that must be evidence of supernaturalism. They would say this is going to require further exploration, and how can we continue to explore this idea? So I don't know that there would be an easy way to definition between those two. I mean, the unknown is the unknown. I think the difference is how quickly somebody's willing to attribute a supernatural cause to unknown or unexpected result of something would be the key. Yes?
And reincarnation, how do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, as a naturalist, the idea of like a specific consciousness wouldn't be something that survives death, so there wouldn't be anything like a normal reincarnation idea. But the fact that we're all made of one thing and all the parts kind of get reused is, in one sense could be thought of in some kind of sense reincarnation, but it's more of a reconstitution of the parts getting reused. But there wouldn't be an idea that there's a survivable aspect of a consciousness that would have any awareness of a previous life. Well, I think, yes.
Is that because you don't have proof of it?
Well, again, a term that I like a lot for how naturalists or science in general approaches information is they would talk about consensually validatable knowledge. So the question is, if there is a way to document it or prove it or have some type of evidence that can be validated by other people, then that creates a context in which it could be explored. The thing is, if it is observable and documentable and repeatable, then we're probably talking about something that's happening within the natural world, the way all the natural laws actually function, and so ultimately it wouldn't end up being something potentially supernatural, but something just in the natural world we haven't discovered yet, which is also a possibility. But again, we don't know what we don't know, and I'm not making a hard and fast claim that all these things are not possible, but based on what we know at this point, there are certain things that I wouldn't be quick to jump to as far as this would be the solution. Okay.
Along that line, just
Yeah.
quickly, I'd like to recommend really to everybody the book Proof of Heaven by Dr. Alexander.
So there's a book that was called Proof of Heaven that was recommended, and I'm assuming that this is exploring the near-death experiences.
Right, yeah. He went into a coma for about a week, and they were about to pull the plug on him, and he woke up, and then eventually wrote the story of what happened out of the body during those 7 days when he was in a coma.
There you go.
Yeah, fascinating.
What's the author?
Even Alexander.
E-B-E-N, Dr. Eben Alexander.
All right. Well, I think with that, we're going to bring it to a close, and I thank you very much for allowing me to share with you.
Thanks, Jim. So, Jim asked me to play this song, this beautiful John Denver song about life. I've been lately thinking about my life's time, all the things I've done and how it's been, and I can't help believing in my own mind. I know I'm gonna hate to see it end. I've seen a lot of sunshine slept out in the rain, spent a night or two all on my own. And I've known my lady's pleasures, had myself some friends, and spent a time or two in my own home. And I have to say it now, it's been a good life all in all. It's really fine to have a chance to hang around and lie there by the fire and watch the evening tide, while my friends and I, old lady, sit and pass the pipe around and talk of poems, prayers, and promises, things that we believe in. How sweet it is to love someone, how right it is to care. How long it's been since yesterday, what about tomorrow? And what about our dreams and all the memories we share? The days they pass so quickly now, nights are seldom long, and time around me whispers when it's cold. The changes somehow frighten me, still I have to smile. It turns me on to think of growing old. For though my life has been good to me, there's still so much to do, so many things my mind has never known. I'd like to raise a family, I'd like to sail away and dance across the mountains on the moon. I have to say it now, it's been a good life all in all. It's really fine to have a chance to hang around and lie there by the fire and watch the evening tide, while all my friends and my old lady sit and pass a pipe around and talk of poems, prayers, and promises, things that we believe in. How good it is to love someone, how right it is to care. How long it's been since yesterday, what about tomorrow? And what about the dreams and all the memories we share? True story. Thanks for making me learn that one, Jim.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Lee. Beautiful. And now it's our time for conscious giving. So if you choose to give today, just know that there is a flow of what we give and what we receive, and that's expressed in so many ways, through our financial resources, through our coming together to help each other grow and just listen, to offer our help here in the hospitality or any other way that you want to volunteer. It's all in the giving. So with that, just hold, if you're giving today through checks, just know that that is a gift of love, and so it is. And so I'm looking at the announcements. I know that there are some things that are happening, and I'm going to let Lee talk about something that's coming up that's very exciting on his end. And also I know that Wednesdays at 1 o'clock we have a prayer here. Paul Calabro, practitioner, leads that. And I know that we have next Sunday Divine Dine. And anyone that wants to bring something, please do. And there's a sign-up sheet. Make sure that you put down what you want to bring so we don't end up with all sugar, but maybe some protein. And I think, is there anything else? Lee, you want to talk about your concert?
Yeah, it's a concert coming up. It's with Anna Ballou. She's an amazing singer-songwriter, vocalist, one of the best kind of up-and-coming
artists I've seen in town, just really amazing, just world class. And so I invited her to come up and do a show. She's going to do a set. I'm going to play percussion with her, and then I'm going to do my own set with my band. So and that's May 21st, a month from today, pretty much. Yeah, so it's super fun.
Go ahead.
I want to invite everyone attending and anybody that we know to come to our gift shop. We're having a really special time for Mother's Day.
Oh.
And we've gotten a lot of new items in, very affordable. They're very lovely gifts, and you can make a mother or sister, a friend, very happy, nominally, and it helps our church. So much more important. It brings new people into our church, and I want them to hear the message that our pastor has and that we have to share with them.
Great.
So it's Mother's Day, that's the 14th of May. I'll be bugging you, but I really love you.
Thank you. That's great. I appreciate that. So I think that's, I have one other announcement. This Tuesday is the San Diego Music Awards, and our wonderful Lee Coulter is nominated for one of the awards. Yay, yay. And I'm going to be there, so I will be sending great vibes
If
for
I
you.
win it, will you accept it on my behalf?
Oh, sure. I would be delighted to.
I've got a corporate gig. Got a-
Where is it? At Humphreys. You have to get tickets ahead of time. Yeah. But, yeah, so hold that in your prayers. How's that? And thank you, Jim, Reverend Jim, just the Jim, the naturalist, for giving us an interesting insight into a different perspective. It's good to see some faces that I haven't seen, Jaya and a few others. So if you're going to the Avocado Festival, enjoy yourself. And I would just like to close in prayer. And then Lee will take us out. Lee and Jim will take us out. So as we just again ground ourselves in that realization that we're here to share with each other in this beautiful spiritual community, and that truly we do welcome all ways of thinking and of being and bless all of that. We know that there is an essence that I believe that is within each of us that connects us with all of those atoms and molecules that Jim spoke about, that we are truly of the stars. And knowing this, my connection with all of you and the world around just enhances my belief that I'm here to give love and receive love, and that's what it's all about. If you boil it down to just that, to know that God is here for all of us, and that beautiful environment and love that I feel that emanates from all of us connects us. And I'm so grateful for the music, for the talk, for all of us being here in community, because this is my spiritual home, and I hope that you feel the same about Hilltop being yours. So let's go out this week and be the best us that we can be, and give our heart and our love and be open to others. Bless us as we go home, and together we say, and so it is.
Thank you for this day, Spirit, thank you for this day. Thank you for this day, Spirit, thank you for this day. This beautiful, this beautiful, this beautiful day. This beautiful, this beautiful, this beautiful day. For this love, thank you for this love, Spirit, thank you for this love. Thank you for this love, Spirit, thank you for this love. This powerful, this powerful, this powerful, this powerful love. This powerful, this powerful, this powerful love. This light, thank you for this light, Spirit, thank you for this light. Thank you for this light, Spirit, thank you for this light. This brilliant, this brilliant, this brilliant light. This brilliant, this brilliant, this brilliant light. This love, thank you for this love, Spirit, thank you for this love. Thank you for this love, Spirit, thank you for this love. This powerful, this powerful, this powerful love. This powerful, this powerful, this powerful love. Thank you for this day, Spirit, thank you for this day. Thank you for this day, Spirit, thank you for this day. This beautiful, this beautiful, this beautiful day. This beautiful, this beautiful, this this beautiful day. Happy Sunday, everyone. I was going to say thank you for this avocado, but it was just too many syllables. Have a great one. Enjoy.